Hello, everyone. It's great to be back with another episode of Vintage Club Conversations. This week, our featured guest is Benedict, co founder and CRO at Arcee.ai. We are going to talk a lot of AI today.
Brian Benedict is a seasoned sales leader with a remarkable track record of driving revenue growth in early stage startups. Brian's expertise lies not just in selling, but in building and refining repeatable sales processes. He's passionate about bringing disruptive, value driven solutions to market, and his experience spans crafting effective go to market strategies, fostering positive team cultures, and accelerating revenue generation. Before co founding Arcee.ai, Brian held significant sales leadership roles at prominent technology firms, including Hugging Face and Tecton. He has also served as a sales advisor and investor for various startups in the technology and software industry.
Welcome to Vintage Club Conversations, Bran.
Oh, I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Manisha.
Great. So, Bran, you have been instrumental in scaling early stage AI companies, Hugging Face, and now RC.ai, your own company, right? From your perspective, what's the most significant shift you have seen in how AI solutions are being sold and adopted in the enterprises today compared to, when you started many years back?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think it boils down to an educated market versus a non-educated market. When you think of new disruptive technologies when they're coming out, a lot of times it takes a lot of education. And so when we were early stage at Hugging Face, most companies had not even heard of what a transformer model is. So to educate them on, why this technology was going to advance and be, so kind of like widespread and needed across the board. This is obviously prior to ChatGPT and prior to those types of innovations that have happened. You had to really kind of turn the crank with people and get them to understand why this whole thing really mattered. Whereas I kind of look at the world of post ChatGPT 3.5 when it launched to the public, right? It became much easier to adopt and much clearer in terms of what that path would be in terms of how people could implement it, because they already were doing so in their personal lives. And now they needed to just, fold it into business operations. So I think that was kind of a very pivotal moment for a lot of companies to digest.
Oh, totally. I think, even when I was starting up, I was like, so I had this idea before ChatGPT was launched. And I was like, man, this product adoption is going to be very, very difficult. But then, in 3 months, we saw what happened. We're like, how can human behavior change so quickly and at such a massive scale?
Yeah,
So I think we are like really lucky to be living this, being in this world during such a transformational shift.
agreed. Absolutely.
So you have had remarkable success in building sales motions from scratch, so notably at Hugging Face and Tecton. Given the rapid pace of change in technology and market demands, what's the biggest challenge you have faced in creating repeatable revenue models? And how has that evolved over time? Because, some things which you're trying to make it repeatable, after probably 2 months, you'll be like, oh my God, this is not repeatable anymore. So, let me evolve it again.
It's a good question. And obviously, these businesses were very different in terms of who they were going after, who's the go-to-market motion with, whether you're selling enterprise or you're trying to do more of a groundswell, like Devi type of, open source, acknowledgement. And so both businesses offer different challenges. I think the biggest thing that from a go-to-market perspective that you want to figure out quite early is, nailing your ICP and then figuring out what is that sales motion. And I think a lot of times people discredit doing experimentation. And a lot of times what I see from a founder-led sales perspective is they have tunnel vision on, this is the one path I want to do, and this is how we should do it. And so, for example, when I was at Tecton, we had a very long sales cycle of getting feature stores implemented into organizations, right? There was a lot of security. Everything was kind of built into their own environments. And when I got there, our sales motion was, something like 6 to 9 months before decisions were being made to make a purchase. And that was a very elongated sales cycle with POCs and trials and all these different things that had to be done. One of the things that we did to alleviate that there was set up a sandbox and allow people to access to the product with, just pretty much like dummy data, which allowed them to accelerate their learnings of the product. So, that was kind of like a big mechanism for us to, go from like a 6 to 9 month sales cycle to pretty much like less than three in a lot of cases. But, I think the biggest, factor that I typically see is, I think a lot of founders have this perception that they need to gate their product until it is qualified. And I think, the best kind of companies and the ones that are doing so well and accelerating their actual work is having a great product and accelerating the ability to get it into people's hands, right? I mean, you're seeing that today with AI driven companies that are literally taking the gates off, letting people try products out without having any kind of recourse, just so they can start using it. And then obviously the volume and increase happens from there. So I think, there's an art to that in terms of how you do it, depending on who you're selling to. But the more, I feel like, especially today, where people are trying to talk to sales less and trying to do more with products out of the gate, I think you're going to be more successful.
But don't you think this depends a lot on ICP, as you also touched upon? I mean, this is very common with developer products, right? I mean,
Yeah.
where CTOs are the buyers, or it's a bottoms up kind of a motion. Do you
Mhm.
think this is also applicable for companies who are selling to GTM folks? Because usually GTM people are lazy to try out the products. Honestly, it's engineers who love trying out new products. And whatever success stories at least I have read about or I have seen, I think it's mainly, when they sell to developers or engineering teams.
Yep, exactly. I mean, I have never been part of a go to market that is sold to salespeople. So my experience is much more leaning towards developers, engineers, IT. But I would say this, right? Yes, I have sold to like go to market functions like CMOs in previous lives. Definitely more hand holding needed there in terms of like adoption of products and technologies. And, it's definitely much more of a balancing act to those folks. But
Hmm.
when I'm looking at like, traditional tech folks, right? I mean, they're kind of like, yeah, just I want to get my hands on the product,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's kind of like they're kind of looking at everything else as just fluff until they can,
Yeah,
play with
it's
it.
basically don't talk to me till I, try out your product, and then after that, I'll decide if I want to talk to you or
Oh
no.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you can't blame them, right? I mean, there's a myriad
Yeah.
of products. There's a very limited amount of time they have, and they're trying to like do their best. But I agree, like if you're selling to a go to market team or sales, team, yeah, those teams are typically busy. Anything you can do to kind of either spoon feed or handhold or set up some type of cadence in which there's collaboration and interactivity throughout the process. I mean, those are always like your best wins because they're not just building trust in your product, they're building trust in your team, which is going to lead them down a better path of working with you all.
Yeah, totally. So going from ICPs to diverse portfolio of clients, right? You have worked with financial giants like Citi, JPMC, to even innovative startups. How do you tailor your approach, sales approach, to meet the unique needs and challenges of different customer segments? And according to you, how has AI influenced what is possible with regard to hyper personalization in client conversations today? I'm sure, when before, when you were selling to financial giants like Citi and JPMC, there would be a lot of customized approach which was required. But
Yeah.
the world has changed now, right? So how do
Yeah.
you see that?
Yeah. I mean, it was so much easier. Well, I guess so much more manually intensive, when I was selling directly to these companies because you had some goods and some bads. The good was you had access to people in person because most people were in offices. So you had the ability to get in an office and actually spend time face to face with people and break down some barriers culturally, which I think definitely helped to just be more of a partner alignment because you're trying to be a partner here. You're not just trying to sell them something and walk away with a company of those size. The bad of this was a lot of the research that you had to do was very manually intensive, right? So you weren't able to kind of, just hit a button on a bot and be like, hey, tell me everything I need to know about, Citibank and their last quarterly earning report and the things that are driving like their biggest changes of what they're doing. So research was much more, manually intensive as well. So things just naturally took longer because the cycles in which you were able to gather information, retain that information, and then formulate your hypothesis just took longer in general. Today, obviously, so much of this is now being done through AI, where you can get so much further down the road, so much quicker. Now it becomes okay. The execution path of how do I best collaborate with this company with the knowledge that I have and that I've gathered to quickly assess and retain what I can actually do with that to make the best plan going forward with this company and this organization. So that typically hasn't been, I haven't seen AI replace a lot of that, so to speak, but I do think a lot of the processes along the way to make it more streamlined are definitely great when you have, more AI intervention, so to speak.
Sure. And do you see the impact of this being shorter sales cycles or productivity of salespeople boosting or both?
Yeah, I mean, again, I can only talk to like the sector I play in right now. I mean, AI in general, from what I've seen from having 20 years of selling, everything's much more condensed. There's much more of a sense of urgency. I mean, this is, board level visibility across organizations. So people are typically much more keen to, get something started and faster. So yeah, I would definitely say AI has definitely played a really big impact in that in terms of the assessments and as in terms of companies being just more open to trying new things at this juncture.
Makes sense. So you have seen this industry from very different angles, right? I mean, we spoke about ICP, we spoke about vertical industries. Now,
Yep.
talking about your angle, right? You have gone from being an individual contributor to global sales leader and now a co-founder. What
Yeah.
are the biggest misconceptions you believe people have about sales in the AI space, and how do you address them?
The biggest misconceptions in the AI space is I think a lot of companies, especially the ones that are still kind of getting up and running on AI, think it's just kind of a panacea and it's going to solve every problem for them and it's going to do every piece of work. And I think that's a lot of the misconception of, oh, like this will build my PowerPoint deck and then this will also be able to present it using voice and then it will also be able to, run an entire process for me or, end to end on sales. Why do I even need people, right? And I think people are missing, the human in the loop aspect of what really is needed to do this, to maintain this. There's still a lot of maintenance of these systems in terms of how it has to work and be efficient. And so I do think there's a little bit of a misconception there, to be honest with you. But I think that's again just the interesting part of where we are, just as like the world's, in my opinion, is where and when have we seen personal use of a technology supersede use within business, right? Everyone is probably using ChatGPT or other types of models for their own personal use, and then in business, it's lacking, right? Whereas, I mean, that's a pretty groundbreaking thing when you think about it, where people on their own have a higher expectation and affinity to see results than when you get into a business setting. And so I think that is continually starting to shift. I think the agent side of orchestration is one of those big leading, indicators and factors of movement. But I do think, people have to kind of like understand there's a different nuance of, what I do for my work versus what I do personally with these types of technologies.
Makes sense. No, I totally agree with your point on the expectations. I think with ChatGPT, it was started here, then it is keeping on growing. And with deep reasoning, obviously, you can do a lot with technology, but user adoption is also important. I was having a call with one of the VPs last week. It was a monthly business review kind of a call, and they're pretty, they're power users of our platform. The discussion, I was like, I had to convince them, so they were a little bit, not so happy about they're only able to reach 85 to 90% automation. And this is 85% productivity gains for
Yeah.
few people. They were like, why do I have to, still review the answers? And I was like, see,
Yeah.
instead of being human in the loop, which is what, the older version of AI was doing, now you are expert in the loop, right? Just imagine if you are able to do something which was taking you 10 hours, it is now taking you 1 hour. So
Right.
spend the other time in actually being creative, making the solutions better. And then they were like, oh yeah, why are we expecting to completely eliminate doing anything which is required in this process?
You're so right with that, and I've seen it too, where we put like an AI, like pretty much customer service like solution in place for one of our clients, where while people were doing this work, the error rate was somewhere around like 20 to 30%, and this was at now like 5%,
Yeah.
and yet they're still, I can't believe it's that bad. It's like, well, wait a minute. Let's look at like what humans do here and what your, error rates have been. Like, is this really that bad? I mean, you're at 95% without touching something versus you're at 70% when your people are involved. So I think there is this expectation, like we're both saying, I guess, is, that this is going to just solve all problems, and and people can just walk away from their day job and not have to worry about these things. And yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, considering your experience in building sales teams, right, since we are talking about people, how has the landscape of sales talent changed, especially in the AI sector? And what skills are most in demand today? So, one of the change which I have done in my interview process is with literally every candidate, I dig deep on how are you using AI today, right? Because that actually sets the culture from company's point of view, and also how efficient the person is going to be. So,
Yeah.
from your perspective, what skills are most in demand today?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I agree 100%. The people that we typically hire have a strong affinity, have either worked at companies with some background doing AI, or have, you know, demonstrated that they were using a lot of different tooling to really help kind of like build a whole process and a whole schedule of like how they actually execute on their job. So if I find people that are just, very manually still cranky, doing the things I was doing like 10 years ago, and I'm probably way less inclined to bring them into an AI company, given just the background there. So yeah, I mean, I think just being up to date on the latest tooling, or we've hired like people with backgrounds like in prompt engineering and others, so that they just have a stronger degree and propensity to and knowledge base around AI, because transference in terms of our technology is not the hardest thing, but it's just the fact of like having that curiosity or already built in, I think, is the biggest thing that I'm always looking for.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, last but not the least, what do you think sales and revenue leaders should expect in 2025? We have just completed Q1 or completing Q1. Any thoughts on trends we might see in the first half of the year, and then bigger trends for the second half of the year?
I think one of the biggest areas, I mean, obviously, like agents are just blowing up everywhere right now. I think they're going to continually get better and better, which is just further automation of that stack and down the approach. I think linkages of different applications to agents are going to continually get better. And I think we're going to start seeing more and more of that. I do think, forward thinking, where I think this is all going to go is you're starting to kind of see more specialization happening with products and with verticalization, and I think that's going to continue. I think horizontally, there's a lot of great solutions out there, and I think we're going to continually see people building platforms around that. I think what we're going to start seeing, and what's going to make it harder to sell, especially at the enterprise, is if it's becoming so much easier to code and to build new product sets, is it going to start eliminating other SaaS solutions that are out there, right? I mean, I know there's been a lot of talk already about can we get rid of like DocuSign and other types of solutions at big companies, because now I can just code it internally. But if you start peeling back the onion of that, well, then what are big companies then going to buy in general? If they have the ability to replace a lot of different SaaS software that they have, and what is going to be the reason they keep certain vendors and replace others with technology they can build.
Yeah. But do you think, I mean, yeah, it's easy. Of course, I can go on Replit and I can tell Replit that create a version of DocuSign, like an app like DocuSign, it will create. But
Yep.
how do you see the expertise which these vendors have? Because these vendors are working with thousands of customers,
Yeah.
right? And then also maintenance. I mean, if you have engineers who are so good at building an AI platform, why not build it in your product for something which is your core and you're selling to customers.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, I also think like none of these solutions are production ready when you think about like what they're building
Yeah.
like in Riplet or Lovable or stuff or Cursor, right? In terms of like replacing kind of the SaaS tools that they have internally. But will they get there? I mean, look how far we've come, right?
Yeah.
So that's the biggest question. But I do agree. There's also support. There's also other things when things go wrong. Like it's great to build, but you still need to maintain, right? And I think that's always been the build versus buy, mentality of, well, is the cost to maintain, more on us or more on them? And do I really want to start, hiring individuals, which might even cost more than the actual product itself, to maintain these systems that I'm building? So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this all unfolds for sure.
Yeah, totally. I think the surprises which we have got in last 2 years, you can never say never about anything right now.
Yeah, totally true.
Great. I
Totally
think
true.
our listeners are going to love this episode because it's filled with everything AI and tons of amazing insights. Bran, thank you so much. We are going to set aside work for a moment. I think we spoke a lot about AI and get to know you more as a person. The questions will be quick and to the point. Are you
Okay,
ready?
I'm ready.
So, I came across your LinkedIn post on quitting day where you talked a bit about how quitting isn't always a negative thing. What's one thing you have quit that led to something very positive in your life?
Oh, soda, definitely. I've never been a coffee fan. So, I just actually started getting into coffee most recently, but I definitely I wouldn't call it an addiction, but definitely like soda was like my main driver of like caffeine throughout my life. So yes, that has definitely been a very positive thing to quit. And I definitely highly recommend anyone that's also on that journey to take a step back on that one.
Interesting.
Yeah.
One thing you're surprisingly good at outside of work.
I'm a very good piano player. I studied classical piano since I was like probably 6 years old, and even took lessons and did competitions in high school. So most people don't know that about me. A lot of my background, when people get to know me, is more athletic. But piano is another passion of mine.
Wow, that's pretty artistic.
Yeah, thanks.
What is your go to activity when you're looking to unwind for the day? How or why does it help you?
Oh, definitely exercise, definitely a run. I'm a big runner, so if I can get out there, and I try to get it done in the morning more than in the afternoon, but if I'm at that point where that stress and anxiety is hitting a certain point, going for a run just kind of makes me feel so much better.
I'm with you on that. Same works for me too.
Yep, awesome.
And an experience you have had in life that few others would have had, a unique experience. So we have had a couple of very interesting answers in the last episodes, like someone getting stranded at sea for 9 days, and then someone having a first helicopter ride when she was like few hours old. So these are some examples. So the bar is very high. Would love to know, an experience that you have had in life which no one else would have had.
Whew, which no one else would have had. Well, I don't know if it's an experience, but I think it's experiences. So my parents were Disney fanatics, and so I went to Disney World before I was 16, and I live in Boston here, probably over 25 times.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't think many people have had that type of experience where their parents were so fanatically like in love with something where, me and my sister, we had to go with our parents to Disney World so often. So I think that was definitely a very interesting experience of growing up in a culture where, Disney was kind of like such a big centerpiece of our, vacation and, livelihood, I guess, so to speak.
That's very, very interesting. Great. Well, thank you, Brian. I think we spoke about a lot of things, but few things which I'm going back with around sandbox environment. Show the taste of your product to customers or prospects very quickly. Don't keep them waiting. Let them see the value and build versus buy. We will see, what happens to that. But yeah, it's always difficult to maintain the products. So probably the best thing today is at least to go and buy tools and don't spend your core engineering bandwidth in doing something which is not revenue generating for you. And of course, a lot of your experiences will help our viewers. Are there any final words of advice you would like to leave our audience with?
Really, think about AI, and I think you hit the nail on the head on this too. Start implementing this in your own life. If your company is not taking the taking the knowledge base of putting AI tooling within it, do this on your own. This is only going to help accelerate yourself, like within your own career, because if you're not in a company that's AI driven or has AI tooling, get out there and learn. There's so many free courses. There's so many free things out there about agents and stuff. Hugging Face is a great example of a lot of great content that's out there. Go out there and do it. It's going to just make you better in the long term.
Great. Thank you again, Bran. Had a great chat with you.
Thank you for having me.